Do you believe that some of the pain in your life does not come from other people, but from the way you silently speak to yourself? Every time you make a mistake, you blame yourself. Every time you feel weak, you force yourself to be strong. Every time you are abandoned, you convince yourself that you are not worthy of being loved. And each of those silent words, if repeated long enough, becomes a living wound deep within you. Carl Jung believed that whatever we do not dare to face does not simply disappear. It sinks into the unconscious, only to return in the form of anxiety, shame, self-doubt, and the very choices that keep us trapped in suffering. That is why healing does not begin by forgetting the past, nor by forcing yourself to become a more perfect person. It begins the moment you learn to turn inward and speak to that wounded part of yourself with a different voice. In this video, you will discover why the way you speak to yourself each day can quietly shape the course of your life. You will begin to recognize which inner voice has been causing your pain, which wounded part of you has been waiting to be heard, and why self-compassion is not a sign of weakness, but the very first doorway to inner freedom. Speak to yourself this way, and perhaps you will realize that life is not healed by becoming someone else, but by finally stopping to abandon the person you truly are. Number 1. The secret of your inner voice. There is a voice that lives quietly within every human being. It does not speak aloud, yet it can silently determine the way you see yourself after a mistake, a rejection, or a moment when you were not the one chosen. The dangerous thing is that this voice rarely appears as an enemy. It feels familiar, reasonable, almost like the most rational part of yourself. It tells you not to hope too much, not to believe that you can do it, not to let anyone see your vulnerability, not to take one more step, because if you fail, it may hurt even more than before. I once had a friend named Stephen when we worked together at a media company in Boston, United States. Stephen was remarkably meticulous. He always arrived early, prepared thoroughly, spoke calmly, and almost never allowed his emotions to interfere with his work. From the outside, he seemed like someone who had complete control over his life. Yet during meetings, whenever our manager casually said something like, "This part just needs a little revision," Stephen would immediately grow much quieter. He would still nod, still take notes, still appear composed. But something in his eyes changed. It was as though one ordinary piece of feedback had pulled him out of the present and carried him back to a much deeper place within himself. One evening, as we sat in a small cafe near the office after work, Stephen admitted that every time he received feedback, the same familiar thought would appear in his mind. "I'm still not good enough." It was not a violent thought, yet it hurt in an incredibly quiet way. It did not knock him down all at once, but it made every effort feel heavier. Although other people were simply talking about his work, what he heard inside was something entirely different. That he was not capable enough, not worthy enough, not safe enough to deserve recognition. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." From Jung's perspective, human beings do not live only through the thoughts they are consciously aware of. Beneath consciousness lie old beliefs, silent feelings of inadequacy, and the conclusions we once drew about ourselves after repeated experiences of pain. When these hidden patterns remain unseen, they do not disappear. They become the way we react, the way we love, the way we fear, the way we limit ourselves, and eventually, we mistake them for our personality or our destiny. This is the secret of the inner voice. It rarely speaks from the truth of the present. Instead, it speaks from the memories of the past. A simple piece of feedback today may awaken the feeling of being judged years ago. An unanswered message may touch an old fear of abandonment. A single failure may revive the belief that you must always be perfect in order to deserve love. And when you fail to recognize this, you believe you are seeing life through reason, when in reality you are seeing everything through the lens of an unnamed wound. Your inner voice is like an invisible editor of your life. Life presents an event, but that voice decides how the story will be rewritten. A door remains closed, and it writes, "I was never worthy of being chosen." A small mistake needs correcting, and it writes, "I always ruin everything." Someone leaves, and it writes, "No one ever truly stays with me." As these stories are repeated in silence, they gradually become the atmosphere in which you live every single day. Some people are not truly afraid of failure. They are afraid of what their inner voice will do to them after they fail. They fear the long nights of self-blame. They fear the shame spreading through their chest. They fear having to look at themselves through cold, unforgiving eyes. And so, they never move forward. They call it being cautious, but at a deeper level, it may simply be a way of avoiding a pain that has become all too familiar. When the inner voice becomes excessively harsh, people lose more than faith in the future. They lose the feeling of being safe when they are alone with themselves. That is why the first step is not to force this voice into silence. The more you deny it, the more fiercely it returns during your weakest moments. What matters more is learning to hear it with awareness. When it tells you that you are not good enough, pause for a moment. Do not rush to believe it. Do not rush to fight against it. Instead, ask yourself, is this the truth of the present, or is it the echo of an old wound? A single question like this can create a small space between you and your unconscious reaction. And within that small space, freedom begins to emerge. Many inner voices were never born to destroy you. They were clumsy attempts to protect you. They told you not to try because failure once caused you deep pain. They told you not to trust anyone because your trust had once been betrayed. They insisted that you had to be perfect because there may have been a time when you only felt loved if you did everything well. But what once helped you survive the past can become the very cage that traps you in the present. Once you understand this, your inner voice is no longer an absolute verdict. It becomes a signal. It shows you where fear still lingers within your soul, where pain still remains, and which parts of you are still waiting to be acknowledged. From the moment you learn to listen without condemning yourself, your inner dialogue begins to change. You no longer stand before yourself as a judge. Instead, you become a witness, someone who understands, someone gentle enough to step into the old rooms of your soul. Perhaps healing does not begin with some dramatic change in the outside world. Perhaps it begins in a very small moment, the moment you hear your inner voice and no longer bow before it as though it were your destiny. You realize that it may be fear, not truth. It may be memory, not your identity. And from that very moment, you begin to learn a different way of living, one that is no longer guided by old wounds, but supported instead by a gentler, deeper awareness of yourself. Number 2. The wounds created by self-criticism. When your inner voice begins to shift from guidance to judgment, a silent wound begins to form. It is neither loud nor visible, yet it sinks deeply into the way you see yourself after every mistake. An event may happen only once, but self-criticism forces you to relive it again and again in your mind. It pulls you back to the same moment, the same feeling, the same cold message telling you that you should have been better. Gradually, what hurts you is no longer just the original event, but the way you continue using yourself to reopen that wound. Self-criticism is dangerous because it often disguises itself as responsibility. You believe you are becoming more mature, more disciplined, more willing to learn from your mistakes. But genuine responsibility allows you to see clearly what happened, correct what can be corrected, and move forward with greater awareness. Self-criticism, on the other hand, keeps you trapped in a courtroom with no final verdict. It never asks what you have learned. It never leads you toward wiser action. It never restores what has been lost. It simply keeps making you pay for an older version of yourself, as though suffering a little longer could somehow rewrite the past. In literature, Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment is a profound portrait of this kind of suffering. After committing his crime, he is pursued not only by society, but by his own mind. His tiny room, the streets, even ordinary conversations become places where the voice of guilt echoes relentlessly. What ultimately breaks him is not merely what he has done, but his inability to escape the judgment within himself. Wherever he goes, he carries an invisible courtroom inside his chest. Carl Jung once wrote, "Neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering." Some forms of pain are meant to be experienced honestly, but when people do not know how to face them, that pain changes its form. It becomes anxiety, shame, guilt, or an endless cycle of inner torment. Instead of allowing ourselves to suffer in order to understand, we use suffering to punish ourselves. Instead of learning from our mistakes, we turn those mistakes into evidence that we are unworthy of love. From a psychological perspective, chronic self-criticism is more than a negative thought. It is a mechanism that trains the brain to perceive mistakes as threats. Every time you fail and then attack yourself, your nervous system learns that failure means danger, shame, and a loss of worth. As a result, the next time you face a challenge, you are not simply afraid of making a mistake. You are afraid of the judgment you know you will inflict upon yourself afterwards. You begin avoiding opportunities, postponing decisions, and shrinking away from challenges, not because you are weak, but because you have become deeply accustomed to being punished whenever you are less than perfect. This is the fragile line between remorse and self-destruction. Remorse carries light. It helps you recognize what was wrong and become wiser because of it. Self-criticism carries no light at all. It locks you inside an old room where every mistake is magnified, while every good quality within you fades into darkness. When you say, "I made a mistake," there is still a path forward. But when you say, "I am a terrible person," you have turned a single action into a sentence against your entire identity. Self-criticism is like an invisible rope wrapped around a wound. Every time you think you are not good enough, the rope tightens. Every time you call yourself a failure, it tightens again. Every time you reject an opportunity because you are afraid you will ruin it, it tightens even further. Eventually, what hurts you is no longer the original event, but the way you keep that wound constantly constricted. You believe you are reminding yourself to do better, when in reality you are leaving your soul with no room to breathe. Some people carry self-criticism into love. When the other person falls silent, they immediately assume they have done something wrong. When a relationship grows distant, they believe they were never worthy enough to be loved. They fail to see that other people also carry their own limitations, wounds, and shadows. Instead, they turn every blade inward. Others carry self-criticism into their work. They overwork, take on too much, never allow themselves to rest, and never dare to say no. From the outside, they appear hardworking and caring, but inside, they are desperately trying to outrun the feeling of never being enough, as though the moment they stop, their own inner voice will condemn them once again. But your mistakes are not the whole of who you are. One poor decision cannot erase your dignity. One moment of weakness cannot define your entire soul. What happened deserves to be faced honestly, but it does not have to become your chains. You can take responsibility without crushing yourself. You can learn from pain without making pain the only home you have left. Perhaps true maturity begins the moment you stop using shame to force yourself to change and begin using honesty to guide yourself forward instead. What you need to do is very simple. Pay attention to the very first sentence that appears in your mind whenever you make a mistake. Do not rush to believe it. Simply notice which fear it comes from, which wound it carries, which story you have been holding onto for far too long. Then replace one sentence of self-condemnation with one of responsibility that is free from cruelty. Instead of saying, "I'm terrible," say, "I'm learning how to do better." Instead of saying, "I always ruin everything," say, "I didn't do well this time, but I can still make it right." Sometimes a single change in the way you speak to yourself is enough to soften your inner world, like a hand slowly loosening its grip around a wound. If this part has spoken to your heart, take a few quiet seconds and answer honestly. What is the self-critical sentence you have been carrying for far too long? Share your thoughts in the comments below. You do not have to tell your entire story. Simply write down one sentence you are ready to let go of, or one kinder sentence you want to begin saying to yourself from today onward. Sometimes, giving a wound its name is the very first moment it no longer has to live in the darkness. Number 3. The healing power of self-compassion. The moment you stop using shame to force yourself to change, another door begins to open. After all the self-blame, after the feeling that you must keep paying for what has already happened, what you truly need is not another harsh voice inside your head. You need a different way of being with yourself, a way that neither denies your mistakes nor turns them into a life sentence. A way that is honest enough to see what needs to change, yet gentle enough not to wound your soul any further. This is the quiet power of self-compassion. The strange thing is that people often know how to love themselves only when everything is going well. When we are strong, successful, and recognized, accepting ourselves comes naturally. But the moment we become weaker, make a mistake, or lose our way, we suddenly become strangers to ourselves. We speak to others with kindness, yet speak to ourselves with harshness. We understand other people's pain, yet treat our own pain as something shameful. It is this inner division that keeps the soul from ever truly resting. After all, No one can truly heal if they are loved only on the days when they are not broken. One of our viewers once shared in the comments that it had taken her many years to forgive herself for a choice she had made long ago. The event itself had long passed and no longer occupied the same place in her life. Yet every time she remembered it, her heart grew heavy, as though a part of her had remained frozen in that moment. What struck her most was that she could comfort her friends with remarkable gentleness whenever they failed. She could remind them that everyone loses their way at times, that everyone needs time to understand, and that everyone deserves another chance to begin again. Yet when it came to herself, she was far more unforgiving, as though she were not allowed to make mistakes, not allowed to be weak, not allowed to need forgiveness. Then one night, while writing in her journal, she asked herself, "If my closest friend told me this same story, would I speak to them the way I have been speaking to myself all these years?" That single question left her speechless, because for the first time, she realized that the compassion she so freely offered to others was exactly what her own soul had been longing for all along. Carl Jung once wrote, "The acceptance of oneself is the essence of the whole moral problem and the epitome of a whole outlook on life." In the deepest sense of his words, accepting yourself does not mean closing your eyes to everything or pretending nothing is wrong. It is a courageous encounter with your whole being, one in which you bring not only your brightest qualities into the light, but also the parts that remain wounded, immature, and still learning how to love. Human beings often try to heal by cutting away everything that makes them feel ashamed. But what is cut away never truly disappears. It simply retreats into the shadows, only to return through exaggerated reactions, unnamed sadness, or an unsettling sense of emptiness, even when everything on the outside appears perfectly fine. What makes compassion so powerful is that it does not require you to deny the truth. It does not tell you that you have done nothing wrong. It does not pretend that the past does not matter. Nor does it transform pain into an artificially beautiful story. It simply changes the place from which you look at yourself. Instead of standing as your own judge, you begin standing as someone who genuinely wants to understand. Instead of asking why you are so flawed, you begin asking what within you has been hurting so deeply that it never learned another way. That small shift alone can soften the tension inside your heart. Some wounds do not need more explanations. They simply need a presence that refuses to walk away. Imagine compassion as a small lamp placed inside an old room of your soul. That room may still be covered in dust. There may still be unopened letters, broken belongings, and traces of memories you once wanted to hide forever. If you enter that room carrying only judgment, you will want to shut the door as quickly as possible. But when even a small light is present, everything stops looking like a monster. You begin to see more clearly. This is an old memory. This is a fear that has remained far too long. This is the part of me that was never taught how to live with greater gentleness. The light does not erase the room. It simply gives you the courage to walk into it without hating yourself. And when you enter in this way, what was once called weakness begins to reveal another face. Perhaps it is simply a part of you that has endured far too much for far too long. Perhaps it is a sorrow that no one ever truly listened to. Perhaps it is the exhaustion of someone who spent a lifetime trying to do everything right in order to deserve love. When these parts are seen through the eyes of compassion, they no longer appear shameful. Instead, they become signs of a soul that fought to survive, a soul that tried to make its way through darkness using the only imperfect tools it had. This is also remarkably close to the journey toward wholeness that Jung so often described. We do not heal by preserving only the version of ourselves that is bright, strong, and admired. We heal when we stop dividing ourselves. The part that once lost its way, the part that once felt weak, the part that made poor choices, the part that disappointed others, all of them deserve to be brought back into the same conscious life. Not to glorify our mistakes, but to prevent them from continuing to control us from the shadows. Once a part of you has been seen with compassion, it no longer needs to cry out through pain. From this point forward, the way you speak to yourself becomes more than simply replacing a few sentences in your mind. It becomes a ritual of coming home. Every time you choose to speak to yourself with kindness, you are bringing a forgotten part of yourself out of the darkness. Every time you refuse to use a mistake as proof that your entire being is unworthy, you remove another layer of old armor. Every time you remain gently present with your pain, you teach your soul that it does not have to be perfect in order to be accepted. This is not indulgence. It is how a human being slowly rebuilds trust in themselves. Perhaps self-compassion is the quietest turning point in the entire healing journey. You do not have to become perfect before you deserve peace. Learn to stand beside yourself even when you feel weak, even when you have not done everything right. For only when harshness no longer leads the way does the soul finally have enough space to soften, to grow, and to keep moving forward. Number 4. Dialogue with your shadow instead of running from it. Once you have learned to treat yourself with compassion, the next step is not simply to remain in that gentleness. Your gentleness must become deep enough to lead you toward a place that is far more difficult to face, the shadow within. There are parts of us that do not disappear simply because we refuse to name them. Denied envy, swallowed anger, hidden fear, the longing to be recognized that we feel ashamed of, all of these continue to live in the hidden rooms of the soul. And the more we run from them, the more they find ways to return through unexpected reactions, words we later regret, and repeated choices that even we cannot fully explain. Carl Jung once wrote, "Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is." In Jung's understanding, the shadow is not merely the dark or evil side of human nature. It is everything we refuse to acknowledge as part of ourselves. It may be selfishness, but it may also be suppressed strength. It may be anger, but it may also be the ability to establish healthy boundaries that we have never dared to use. It may be the longing to be seen, but because we were once criticized for being too sensitive, too ambitious, or too different, we buried that longing deep inside ourselves and labeled it as something unacceptable. In the Bible, the story of Cain and Abel offers a powerful image of a shadow that was never brought into dialogue. Cain saw that Abel's offering had been accepted while his own had not. And just before Cain killed his brother, God said to him, "Sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." Sin is portrayed as a wild creature waiting outside the door. This image closely reflects what Jung sought to express. The shadow does not disappear because we pretend it is not there. It waits at the entrance of conscious life, longing to be recognized. If we refuse to face it, it eventually enters in its most primitive form. Cain never entered into dialogue with his envy. He refused to face the pain of comparison, the feeling of rejection, or the humiliation of not being chosen. Instead, he allowed the shadow to speak through his actions. That is the greatest danger of all. When an emotion has been denied for too long, it no longer needs words. It moves directly into behavior. A person who refuses to acknowledge their anger may become cold, sarcastic, or quietly destructive. A person who refuses to admit their envy may constantly diminish the achievements of others. A person who refuses to face their fear of abandonment may end up controlling the people they love until they can barely breathe. Modern psychology describes the same phenomenon in a different language. When people try to suppress a thought or an emotion, the brain does not truly erase it. Instead, it continues monitoring the very thing it is trying to keep out of awareness. As a result, whatever we desperately try not to think about often becomes even stronger. Suppressed anger may become physical tension. Denied fear may become anxiety. Desires that have been covered in shame may emerge as impulsive behavior. Running away from your shadow is like trying to hold a ball beneath the surface of the water. The harder you push it down, the more forcefully it eventually bursts back up. But entering into dialogue with your shadow does not mean allowing it to control you. This distinction is essential. Jung did not encourage people to follow every instinctive impulse they experienced. He invited us to bring what is unconscious into the light, so that it would no longer rule us from behind the scenes. Dialogue means having the courage to say, I see this anger, I see this envy, I see this fear. I will not let it steer my life, but I will not pretend it does not exist either. Once it has been acknowledged, the shadow no longer needs to pound on the door through violence. It begins to reveal itself as a message. Imagine your shadow as a stray dog standing outside your porch on a cold night. If you keep the door shut, it will scratch, bark, and frighten you. If you open the door and allow it to rush inside unchecked, your home will descend into chaos. But if you switch on the light, stand your ground, look at it, establish boundaries, and begin to understand why it is there, that wildness can gradually be tamed. It does not need to be destroyed. It needs to be recognized and placed where it belongs. In many cases, the very energy that once frightened you can become a source of vitality, provided it is guided by consciousness. Anger is one example. Many people were taught that anger is something bad, so they learned to swallow it. Yet anger is not always the enemy. Sometimes it is a faithful guard warning you that your boundaries have been crossed. If you deny it, you may become passive, betray yourself, and allow others to walk over you again and again. But if you enter into dialogue with it, you can ask yourself, what part of me has been violated? What do I need to protect? Where do I need to say no? Then anger is no longer the fire that burns your house down. It becomes the torch that illuminates the place where a new boundary needs to be built. Envy works in much the same way. It often makes us feel ashamed, so we quickly deny its existence. But if we look more deeply, envy may reveal a forgotten longing. You may feel uncomfortable around someone who lives freely because a part of you longs for that same freedom. You may feel a quiet ache when someone else receives recognition because you have suppressed your own need to be seen for far too long. The shadow does not contain only poison. It also contains exiled pieces of your life energy. What you need to do is simple, though it requires honesty. When a dark emotion appears, do not rush to act on it, and do not rush to drive it away. Silently give it a name. This is anger. This is envy. This is fear. This is the longing to be recognized. Then write down 3 things. When did this emotion appear? What is it trying to protect? If it could speak in a calmer voice, what would it want to tell me? That alone is enough to begin bringing your shadow out of the blind spot. Once the shadow has been seen, it no longer has to break down the door to enter your life. Number 5. When you become a safe place for yourself. By this point, after finding the courage to face your shadow instead of running from it, the healing journey is no longer a battle to eliminate something within you. It becomes a journey home. Once you have seen your fear, your anger, your envy, your wounds, and the parts of yourself that were once rejected, the deepest question is no longer, how can I stop hurting? Instead, it becomes, how can I remain with myself when the pain appears? A person truly begins to heal only when their inner world is no longer a place where they must constantly defend themselves, but becomes a place safe enough to lay down every mask they have been carrying. Many people spend their entire lives searching for safety outside themselves. They wait for a partner who loves deeply enough, a family that understands completely, a stable career, a great achievement, or enough recognition to finally convince themselves that they have value. But the outer world is always changing. Someone who once loved you may leave. A career that once made you feel secure may begin to crumble. Success that once filled you with pride may eventually lose its meaning. If your entire sense of safety depends upon things that can disappear, you will always live with a quiet fear that the moment your outer world changes, your inner world will collapse along with it. Some people are remembered not only because of their talent, but because of the kindness they continue to carry after enduring profound loss. Keanu Reeves is one of those people. He is widely known for films such as The Matrix, where he portrayed Neo, and the John Wick series, where he became one of Hollywood's most iconic action stars. Yet beyond the spotlight, what has made so many people admire him is not simply his career, but his calmness, humility, and kindness. His life has been marked by deeply personal tragedies, from the death of his close friend River Phoenix to the loss of his child, and later the passing of Jennifer Syme, the woman he loved. Yet Keanu never allowed his suffering to harden into bitterness. He continued living simply, treating others with kindness, and quietly moving forward without feeling the need to prove that he had conquered his grief. Carl Jung once wrote, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." When we look only toward the outside world, we easily dream that something out there will eventually save us, a perfect person, a perfect circumstance, or a perfect version of ourselves. But when we turn inward, we begin to awaken. We realize that lasting peace cannot come only from arranging the external world according to our wishes. It comes from building an inner center, a place where we do not immediately abandon ourselves after failure, where we do not hate ourselves for being vulnerable, and where we do not lose our direction simply because someone else is no longer beside us. This is the moment when we stop living like leaves blown about by every wind and begin to discover our own roots. From Jung's perspective, the journey of individuation is not about becoming flawless, brilliant, or free from contradiction. It is the process through which the scattered parts of yourself gradually find their place within one conscious life. Your strong side no longer needs to deny your fragile side. Your rational mind no longer needs to dismiss your emotions. Your light no longer needs to fear your shadow. When these parts are no longer separated from one another, you begin to feel that you have a home within yourself. And once that home exists, you no longer have to wander through every relationship searching for somewhere to belong. You still need love. You still long for connection. But you no longer enter the world like someone who is homeless within their own soul. Imagine your inner world as a lighthouse standing in the middle of a dark sea. The sea will never promise calm waters forever. There will be storms, heavy fog, and nights when no ship answers your light. If all your hope depends upon the sea becoming peaceful, you will remain anxious forever. But if the lighthouse within you continues shining, you can still find